Jurgen Klopp planned to solve Liverpool's eternal problems in the midfield before the current season. To do this, the English club rented Brazilian player Arthur for 4.5 million euros, who was recently purchased by Juve for 76. However, just 2 weeks later, Liverpool wanted to terminate the loan, but it didn't work out. It became apparent that the player was not good enough, and he also suffered from an injury. And even when Arthur recovered, he didn't play a single minute in the Premier League, despite Liverpool's awful injury problems. Klopp played anyone else in the midfield just to avoid playing Arthur. Eventually, the Brazilian only played 13 minutes for the first team during the entire season. The media calculated that if you divide money spent on renting and paying Arthur's salary, each touch of the ball cost the club approximately £340,000. By the standards of a top club, the failure with Arthur was a minor loss. It's much worse when a star player is not rented but bought for a large sum and doesn't meet expectations. These are the type of stories that are included in the main part of the ratings. In 10th place is Brazilian player Antony. His transfer was completed with a huge markup and closed on the final day of the transfer window, so it's not surprising that he hasn't lived up to expectations so far. Ajax was willing to sell him for 80 to 90 million in the middle of the summer, but United backed out, claiming it was too expensive. But towards the end of the summer, they returned and paid 100 million with bonuses included. Geniuses! It was more expensive because Ajax didn't have time to find a replacement. Still, the 23-year-old had some good games this season, therefore we don't rank him high in our list. But the transfer fee made him play much better. It was crucial for Ten Hag to have a player who could create width in the attack while understanding the structure of the game. That's why the coach insisted on purchasing a winger that he had previously worked with at Ajax. The problem is that Antony is a top player according to the Dutch league standards, where defending is weak and there is a lot of space. Although in the Netherlands, the winger wasn't way better than everybody else. 9+8 last season is his best result. When attempting to transfer this stat to a more robust league, it's divided by 3. It all makes sense. What doesn't make sense is paying 100 million for such a player. Antony is a 30-40 million winger. In England, he doesn't have enough impact on the game, nor does he execute enough accurate actions, often overplaying. There is a metric called actions leading to a goal, which includes passes, attempts to dribble, or simple passing, and so-called drawing fouls. It's clear that we are talking about a foul that a player with the ball actively seeks, and after the set piece, a goal is scored. Now back to Antony's case. He only has 0.3 such leading actions per 90 minutes, ranking last in the top 10 of his team. For a winger playing in the attack, this number is almost nothing, especially given the transfer fee paid. There are more questions to the board of United rather than to the player. At least he puts in the work. Given his age and the fact that he has experience working with Ten Hag, Antony has all the odds to level up, but for now, he's more of a disappointment. The 9th place was shared between two former decent players, Philippe Coutinho and Hector Bellerin. However, until their last transfer, there was still hope they would rise again. Let's start with Bellerin. It's really funny that he was picked up by Barcelona last summer. Yes, at that time the 27-year-old player, who was valued at 20 million, was picked up by the Catalan club for free. It's always tempting, the Juve's management won't deny it. But where is the current Barca and where is Bellerin, who has long been more interested in fashion, travel and ecological issues? Xavi quickly realized this. It only took 7 appearances for the lad on the field, and in the winter, the former footballer was sent to Sporting for just $1 million. Maybe they thought they could earn money on the transfer, but that didn't happen either. They spent almost 3 times as much on the player's salary for 5 months as they received from Sporting. And most importantly, in Portugal, Hector is also messing around. It happens that people end their football career before the age of 30. Even though they are still healthy and valuable, Transfermarkt currently values Bellerin at 8 million. There is health and value, but it seems that there is no longer any interest in football. Perhaps something similar happened to Coutinho. We have long discussed that he's not okay, but in Aston Villa, he seemed to start to reborn. If you don't like watching Felipe Coutinho, then you should stop watching football, because that was absolutely beautiful. This is what Gerrard said after the game against Leeds in February of 2022, in which the Brazilian scored and made 2 assists. By the end of last season, Coutinho had 5+3 in 19 Premier League games. He was bought for 20 million in the summer, but then something weird happened. The Brazilian was missing from the starting lineup, well, he just wasn't producing results, and then finally disappointed under the new coach Emery. The team started winning games, gaining points, but Coutinho was not part of the breakthrough under the Spanish manager. Since February, he has been out of the squad. With one of the highest sellers on the team, it's a failure. The spot number 8 is for Gonçalo Guedes. The highly gifted Portuguese forward was once referred to as the new Ronaldo. It's been a while since then, but the price for Guedes is still held at a decent level. Last season was actually the best in his career, as he scored 11 goals and got 6 assists in La Liga for crisis-hit Valencia. Overall, it was clear that it was time to move to a higher level, and that's when Jorge Mendes, the famous Portuguese agent, made a deal for the player to move to Wolverhampton at a discount of 8 million from the estimated value. Great! A 25-year-old player in the perfect form, non-injury prone, is moving to a club with a ton of Portuguese-speaking players, and the Wolves need a strong attacking player. They will believe in Guedes. It seemed like what could go wrong? But it was a miss with Guedes. The player seemed to have been replaced, and he couldn't even handle the level of the Premier League. The forward was not in the top 20 players of the team according to WhoScored, before he was sent on loan to his hometown club Benfica in the middle of the season, where he once became a star. It seemed that Guedes would become a top player again in his hometown club. Roger Smith tried to play Guedes in different positions, but only 1 goal in 2 months in the league is certainly not what we expected from the star, and that an unpleasant knee injury. Guedes made a recovery by April, but he is currently receiving very little playing time. Charles de Ketelaere is the 7th player. It should be clear that AC Milan has not been spending a lot of money on transfers in recent years, and the young Belgium is the most expensive acquisition since Frankie Siet. It's not surprising, as the 21-year-old got 18+10 in 1 season in Bruges and received comparison to De Bruyne. So Milan took a risk and paid 32 million for the Ketelaere, spending almost all of their summer transfer budget on the young player. However, since August, the young Belgian midfielder hasn't got any goals or assists, but given that this is his first season in the top league and top club, he still deserves to be in our list. As for being the top club, Milan has few stars and Charles is mostly a substitute player. He only has a third of the possible playing time in Serie A. Brahim Diaz is better as the number 10, and he's only 1 year older than the Ketelaere and is on loan, something Milan didn't invest as much in as they did in Charles. However, Brahim contributes much more. Legendary Italian coach Arrigo Sacchi described Charles' game best. He enters the field almost like a loser, confused and afraid. La Gazzetta dello Sport included Charles in its list of the worst transfers of the Serie A season. Advanced statistics show that the attacking midfielder's contribution to the team's goal is very low. Of course, it's too early to draw a bottom line in this story. Those who criticize the Belgian do so with regard to his age and his debut season in the top league. So we will pause and believe Zlatan, who said in February, "I recognize myself in him. I recognized myself when I took my first step outside Sweden. It took me a year. It's hard to be away from your country and your family. He has to get used to it. I helped him settle in the dressing room. He needs 1 reference match, and once he does, he will be unstoppable. If he keeps listening to the coach, this will be all right. But for now, Charles get an F." The spot number 6 is reserved for tons of players from Nottingham Forest. The club spent this staggering 200 million last summer. This isn't as shocking as the number of players that were brought in, around 30 of them. It was a weird wholesale. I guess they were just thinking, let's bring as many as we can and hopefully someone will blow up. You can't do it in the Prem. Let's begin with the first one. The second most valuable transfer was the Nigerian striker Taiwo Awoniyi. After having a great run in Bundesliga last year, this year he managed to score only 4 times. Yet another Nigerian, Emmanuel Dennis, is way worse. He's a striker with 349 minutes per goal in the Prem. The next one is Remo Freuler. He was decent in Atalanta, but was lost in England. Now is the turn for Jesse Lingard. Everybody got excited after his phenomenal loan to West Ham. Last year he enjoyed Nottingham with a fat paycheck. Should have become the leader of the team, yet it's the same old Jesse. 17 appearances, 0 goals and 0 assists in the entire season. The French right-back Julien Bianconnet was signed for 10 million, though he got a severe injury in October, but before that had just several appearances. The last one is Omar Richards. He went missing after the injury. Richards should have been recovered by February, but was never on the pitch again. Is he still alive? Splurging in such stupid way guarantees you will be around the relegation zone. Nottingham was just 4 points above Leicester. I don't see any logic here. They are playing so bad, yet they are not changing the manager, but instead by more players. Well, it's fair to say that some of the signings were still decent, but when you bring 30 players, 1 or 2 will definitely stand out. But it's just pure luck. That's how they picked the starting 11 too. Throughout the season, 30 different players were in the starting lineup. That's crazy. The rest were just lucky to avoid the relegation zone. In 5th place are 2 Italian center forwards, Andrea Bellotti and Gianluca Scamacca. Both are old school players, but they have shown high effectiveness in their previous clubs, especially the first one. Therefore, let's start with Scamacca. Gianluca made a breakthrough in his career last season with Sassuolo, scoring 16 goals and only 1 of which was a penalty. West Ham paid 36 million for him, although the Italian didn't fit the club's playing style. Scamacca is not very involved in the game, but he's a very great player inside the box and good in the air. No wonder with his height of 2 meters. It seemed that Gianluca was brought in to diversify the attack, sometimes switching to a simplified version of the game with frequent crosses. But despite the fact that Moyes' football didn't work out, the coach didn't actively use the newcomer. If the Italian forward disappeared on the field and then suddenly appeared out of nowhere and scored, that would be acceptable. The coach would look at him differently, but it's not the case. As a result, the striker has only scored 3 goals and the club suffered from low efficiency, 14th in the league, and had a bad season overall. As for Bellotti, we've been waiting for a long time for his move. 7 seasons with Torino. He has been consistently scoring there, nearly becoming the top scorer in Serie A. But we wanted to see how many goals he could score with more creative partners. And what? Having moved at a good age of 28 to Roma, a club that claims to participate in the Champions League. With a coach who knows how to work with strikers, Andrea suddenly stopped scoring. Completely! He has 0 goals in Serie A, yet his XG is around 4. This is the worst season in Bellotti's career. Here's his shots map. Look, the big yellow circle is a missed penalty, and Bellotti had at least 5 bigger moments equivalent to XG models to penalties, but Andrea didn't score once. In spite of everything, Bellotti's competitors have a failing season, including Abraham, who also struggles to score goals. Imagine what it's like for poor Mourinho with these two. Summing up Bellotti and Scamacca, of course, one can attribute a lot to bad luck and adaptation to new teams, but it's also quite possible that they are simply overrated forwards for mid-table clubs, and it worked out for them there, apparently simply because there was no particular pressure. Richarlison is 4th in our list. His appearance in this list could have been predicted as early as last summer, as it was clear that his transfer was unnecessary for Spurs. After all, there was still Kane in the team. The main ones on the wings were Sane and Kulusevski. As a result, the star of Everton and the Brazilian national team moved to Tottenham to warm the bench. Okay, he's a backup player. Richarlison played in 23 Premier League games, receiving only 27% of the playing time. Clearly, not what he came to Tottenham for. After appearing in the biggest games of the season, in the round of 16 of the Champions League against Milan, both times as a sub for the last 20 minutes, the Brazilian went crazy. This season, excuse the word, it's been shit, because I don't have minutes, I suffered a little with injury. And what did he want? By the beginning of March, he didn't score a goal in the league, made only 2 assists and earned a penalty. And in the Champions League, he scored only in the starting match of the group stage, after which he felt silent, although he started later in the group stage. Conte, like any coach focused on results and having a full attacking unit, began to look for other options for the most effective combination of players. Richarlison should be especially upset because he's proved he is a great one at the World Cup. 3+1 in 4 games, the most beautiful goal of the tournament, and now he returns to the club where there are other players playing alongside him with a completely different status. The only goal of the season in the Premier League scored at the end of April, a month before the end of the tournament, and that says it all. A great example of how even the coolest player can fail a season if he wasn't needed by the head coach from the start. The Brazilian is Levy's idea, not Conte's. The coach clearly preferred to strengthen the midfield, where he has no equal substitute for Højbjerg and Bentancur. But the president felt it would be wrong not to take advantage of such an offer on the market as the main forward of the Brazilian national team at a bargain price. As a result, we got what we got. On the other hand, there is a possibility that Levy solved an important question for the future with this transfer. Who will become Kane's long-term replacement? Harry's contract expires in June 2024, which means that the probability of him leaving this summer is extremely high. Well, let's see if he can fix the terrible impression of his first season in London. For place number 3, we picked Sadio Mane. His move to Bayern, pretty much the same as other transfers, didn't live up to expectations. The young talent Gravenberch suffered from the lack of minutes. Mazraoui is also not a frequent starter. Even Cancelo, that proved in City that he's a superb player, had the same outcome. And now the German club doesn't want to extend the loan or buy him out. But let's focus more on Sadio Mane. His flop is a sensation. All of us believe he will be a killer in the German league, scoring at least 30 goals. His traits on paper should make him a regular starter option. In the beginning, it was all good. A goal in the Super Cup. Sadio scored in the first game of the Bundesliga and German Cup. In the first 5 UCL games, he got 3 goals and 1 assist. He was the second in Ballon d'Or rating. No one would argue about that. Even lots of goals that were cancelled due to offside didn't destroy the impression. Yet in the game against Werder, Sadio gets a knee injury that now means he'll be missing the World Cup. The absence of the leader was a deal breaker. It was a pity, given in what great form Senegal was approaching the tournament. At the same time, things started to get worse and worse in Bayern. He recovers from the injury, comes back after the winter break, but still struggles to get the momentum. It soon turns out that he's no longer an option for the start, and when he steps onto the pitch, can't do anything. From that time period, Sadio was able to score only once in Bundesliga and showed nothing in the UCL knockouts. That was the reason for the argument with Nagelsmann, and after the game with City, he punched Leroy Sane. Mane was toxic in Liverpool, but there he was a part of the family, and it was easier to resolve all problems. That's not like it is in Bayern. Even though the conflict is over, it doesn't seem he'll stay there for long enough. The management and players quickly realized Mane doesn't have the same efficiency as Lewandowski, but still demands a lot. Around April, there were rumors that Sadio doesn't fit the plans of the new coach. The move was a mistake. People in the club are joking that they signed his twin brother. That's how disappointed people are. 7 goals in Bundesliga are not the reason why Bayern signed the Premier League star and offered him the biggest salary in the league. Number 2 is Phillips. A well-thought £50 million transfer approved by Guardiola. So why isn't one of the best defensive midfielders in the Premier League in recent years playing much? Let's explore one of the biggest transfer flops, as it now seems, in Pep's career. It was planned that Phillips would give Pep depth to the squad. The team only had one high-class defensive midfielder, Rodri. It was not suitable for a club with ambitions to win in all competitions. However, from the very first game, it became clear that Pep wouldn't heavily rely on the player. Then Calvin suffered a shoulder injury and everyone forgot about him. It completely changed when, without any playing practice, he was included in the squad for the World Cup. There, Calvin even got an assist in the game against Wales. For Southgate, Calvin in any condition is one of the core players. Yet for Pep, he is not. The City coach publicly announced that Phillips returned from the World Cup overweight and unable to play. After that, the supporters of Calvin's home club booed him with the chant, "You're too fat to play for Leeds." But soon Pep changed his mind. He has the perfect body now, so sexy, we will see for the weekend. What does this even mean? Some sarcasm and hard-to-read subtext, but it seems to suggest that the rookie hasn't yet grasped Guardiola's football. Remember, something similar to this happened with Jack Grealish in the first season. Jack caught the message, complied Pep's demands, and now became a significant part of City. I'm not sure that something similar will happen with Phillips, who played 90 minutes in a big match for the national team in March in the qualification game against Italy, but spent just 45 minutes on the field in the Premier League in the whole spring. It's not seen that he demonstrates the same drive with which Grealish started learning Guardiola's football. Calvin doesn't comment on his absence from the field, doesn't show any anger or motivation. In the March interview, he spoke about being able to provide his mother with a comfortable life. He looks very much like a boy from a poor family who rose to the top, decided to stop putting in the work. Imagine Pep when a couple of times in April, he applied the formation with two defensive midfielders, preferring to put center-back Stones in the defensive zone. Phillips only came on as a sub in one of these cases. Even earlier, 18-year-old right-back Rio Lewis played alongside Rodri, and Phillips appeared on the field only closer to the end of the game. Anyone, even a center-back, even a young academy winger, according to Guardiola, will play better in defense than a £50 million lad. How much must one not believe in the player? To repeat what I started with, this wasn't a kind of emergency transfer. Pep knew who he was getting, and Bielsa's football wasn't significantly different from Pep's. And what? Did Guardiola get it so wrong? Write down if you have your own opinion. Right now, it's a murky story, to be honest. And in the first place today is the transfer nonsense of the new management of Chelsea, which even continued in the winter window. 329 million for new players is the new winter record in the history of football, and it's more than all the clubs in the Spanish, German, Italian, and French leagues spent together the same transfer window. Amazing! As a result, they set a new world record by a significant margin for total spending in a season, over 600 million euros. The Sheikhs had to hold their beer for the new American owner of the Blues, Bowley. But what's the point of being so generous? A place outside the top 10 in England and elimination in the second round of the Champions League playoffs? Let's start with the summer transfers. Almost everyone brought under Tuchel found themselves in a silly position because the coach they came for was almost immediately fired. This was a serious premise for the failure of the newcomers. Many were used differently than the German specialist intended. It's enough to mention Sterling, whom Tuchel took on as a false nine, but Potter started sending the striker on the run to the right into the midfield, to the left, almost as a lateral. And all this because of an oversupply of expensive forwards. Aubameyang was going into a specific project with his favorite coach, with whom he had his best season in his career, scored 31 goals in the Bundesliga for Dortmund. In Chelsea, after the change of the course and coach, he hardly had a chance. By winter, he was discouraged and excluded from the league's roster, after which the Gabonese simply gave up football, as he did with Arsenal in recent years. Fofana is a highly overrated centre-back. He is a sloppy defender and now worth 80 million. At such price, it makes sense to buy Van Dijk or Diaz, someone who will raise the entire defense to a higher level. It was clear that Fofana was not a great signing. But we expected that Koulibaly would make Chelsea's defense stronger just by his presence on the field. Instead, he stopped being a top defender in one season in London. He started making more mistakes, and the pace of football in the Premier League is faster, and he is no longer young. He looks heavy and clumsy. Cucurella on the left is more or less okay, but he was just inadequately expensive. He is a decent defender, but not worth 63.5 million. As for the winter transfers, they are all just illogical. Some are dumb. You have an oversupply of the attacking players, and you take Phillips on an expensive loan. If you take Phillips, then why take Mudryk immediately after him for the same position, and for the same 90 million that could have been spent to buy Phillips? And then they acquired the young Englishman Noni Madueke for 35 million, who is basically the same as Mudryk, only not hyped. All three roughly have the same functionality, and all three play little, receiving huge salaries. Why? We're also waiting for a separate conversation about Mudryk. He is a hostage to his price. If they had bought him for 35 million, like Madueke, there wouldn't have been such close pressure. Besides, the guy is unquestionably talented, but he also thinks too highly of himself. He needs to work hard, learn, drag himself to the Premier League level, and he doesn't even come back after losing the ball. Give me the ball, I'll sort it out. That's how Mbappe can position himself, but Mudryk is nowhere near. We wish the most expensive Ukrainian player in history to work seriously and progress next season. In conclusion, if Chelsea with such spending on new players doesn't win the Premier League or the Champions League in the next couple of years, and they won, then the current transfer campaign of the Blues will undoubtedly be called the worst in the history of football. It's weird how less than a year after Abramovich sold the club, they could invest over 600 million euros in transfers and make this same team much weaker. We decided not to include Nunez as he became very useful for the team, creating lots of chances both for himself and the partners. And he is the second goal scorer in Liverpool alongside Firmino. No doubt Liverpool paid too much, but he wasn't as bad as other players. Let us know who you think the worst signing is. As usual, don't forget to give this video a like, share it, and hit the subscribe button. See you next time. Until then, know the ball.